You know, the Jeffrey Epstein scandal is this sprawling story of just unbelievable depravity. But a lot of powerful people would be perfectly happy if that story began and ended with just one man. That's why in this explainer, we're going to look past the individual to really understand the network that made him possible, the system that protected him, and most importantly, the survivors who are still fighting for justice.
And wow, those words from survivor Virginia Roberts Giuffre, they really set the stage perfectly, don't they? This isn't just a story about one criminal. It's a story about a whole culture of corruption, a web of influence that goes all the way to the very top.
All right, so here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll look at the scandal's true scope. Then we'll break down the anatomy of this elite network. We'll get into the specific allegations against some very powerful figures, hear directly from the survivors demanding accountability, and finally, we'll put the entire system itself on trial.
Okay, let's just dive right in. We're going to start with the real scope of this thing, which means we have to understand the anatomy of this elite network. See, the simple story, the one they want you to believe, is that Epstein was just some lone wolf predator. But the evidence, especially from his own emails, it tells a totally different story. He wasn't some outcast. He was basically the social director for a very specific, very powerful slice of the American elite. In fact, the journalist Anand Giridharadas coined a term for this group, the Epstein class. And it's not just about being rich. No, it's about a shared way of seeing the world. It's a borderless social network, where these folks are more loyal to each other than to any country. And, as Giridharadas puts it, it's a group that is exceptionally well practiced at just looking away from other people's pain.
So how did this network actually work? Well, Epstein was the hub, the central connector, and the currency they used wasn't just money, it was information barter. They were constantly trading these non-public tips that gave each other an edge, but underneath it all there was this clear contempt for everyday people. This network, it operated by its own rules with this powerful sense of superiority that created a completely closed loop of influence and power.
So who exactly was in this web? Well, this is what's so important to get. These connections, they went way beyond politics or business or entertainment. This was a bipartisan, international network of influence.
And this right here, it just shows you exactly what I'm talking about. In one email, you have Epstein inviting Steve Bannon, a major figure on the political right, to dinner. And who does he offer up as a potential dinner guest? Catherine Rumler, who was Barack Obama's White House counsel. It's just a perfect, stark example of how inside this class, those political divides that seem so massive to the rest of us, they just kind of melt away.
The list of names that have surfaced is just staggering, and it's important to see how they appear in the source files. The documents have thousands of mentions of Donald Trump. Bill Clinton is also mentioned and has been photographed with Epstein. It's been alleged that former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers was asking Epstein for dating advice. And get this, on Christmas Day, Elon Musk allegedly emailed Epstein asking about parties on his island. And these are just a handful of the high-profile names that keep popping up. But the network's reach didn't stop at politics and finance. Not at all. It seems to have stretched deep into the entertainment world, which brings us to another set of really disturbing allegations, a lot of which have come out through various online sources.
Okay, now I need to be really clear here. It's crucial to emphasize that what you're seeing on this slide are unverified claims from online sources. They have not been proven in a court of law. An anonymous victim has claimed she woke up in a room with Jay-Z and Harvey Weinstein. A former assistant has made public allegations about a mentorship network run by Will and Jada Smith, and Beyoncé's name has reportedly appeared on a list of individuals present in the files. Again, these are incredibly serious allegations, but without legal verification, that's what they remain, allegations.
You know, behind all these names and this whole network, there is an immense human cost. And that brings us to the survivors. For them, this scandal isn't just about one man. It's about a justice system that has failed them again and again.
Just think about that number, 30+ years. Some of these women have been fighting for some form of accountability for most of their adult lives. One survivor pointed out that she met Epstein when she was 21 years old. She's now nearly 53. Just let that sink in.
And this quote, it just hits you in the gut. It comes from a survivor after a recent congressional hearing. The Attorney General was asked 3 separate times to just turn around and face the survivors who are sitting right there in the room, and she refused. That one moment just perfectly captures this feeling of being ignored, of being degraded by the very system that's supposed to give you justice.
So you see, this isn't just one mistake, it's a clear pattern. Survivors reported these horrific crimes as early as 1996. For decades, law enforcement just failed to act. Then, when the Department of Justice was finally forced to release files, they somehow failed to redact the victims' names while carefully blacking out the names of powerful men. And after all that, the Attorney General's advice to these survivors was to call the FBI, the same institution they've been calling for decades.
And you can just feel the frustration in this quote from a survivor. She points out that other countries seem to be taking this more seriously. I mean, in the UK, Prince Andrew was stripped of his titles and faces this constant public disgrace because of his connection to Epstein. But here in the United States, there's this profound sense of inaction that survivors find, in their own words, infuriating.
And all of this, it brings us to the final, and maybe the most critical piece of this whole puzzle. Because this isn't just about individual criminals anymore. This is about an entire system on trial. And the fallout is this deep, deep crisis of trust in our most basic institutions.
I mean, just look at this. It lays out two completely different realities. For the powerful, you have a network of influence that protects you, you face no accountability, and you benefit from what some have called a sanctuary city of wealth and power. But for the survivors, you get a system that ignores you, a fight that lasts for decades just to be heard, and then you get insulted with the question, well, why didn't you speak up sooner? So if you were to draw a picture of this whole mess, it would probably look something like this. Jeffrey Epstein is right there at the dark heart of it, but he's really just a small piece of the story. Radiating out from him, you have the Epstein class that gave him social cover and made him seem legitimate, which let him operate right out in the open. Then you have the broader circle of alleged perpetrators. And finally, that huge outer ring, a failed justice system that let the whole thing go on for decades.
And that leaves us right here with this one massive question. The Epstein scandal has exposed a deep rot in the system, a two-tiered system of justice. The survivors, by bravely telling their stories, they've landed the first real punches. But when a system proves itself unable or maybe unwilling to hold the powerful accountable, it forces all of us to ask, what comes next?